Story 1, I was suddenly rocketed out of my body and I could see myself on the surgery table. The doctors were all scrambling and I thought to myself, why are they acting like that? I feel great. I was then pulled upwards from my body. I thought, well, I guess this is it. Goodbye, body. I was then taken into a tunnel by an individual made of light. I had seen the individual before the anesthesia was given to me. When I first saw this being, I thought, who are you? No answer came at that time, nor did an answer come while I was led through the tube of light. Then I was inside a void with the mysterious being. I asked this being, who are you? And the being said, who do you want me to be? The being then took on my mother's voice and said, I can use this voice if it makes you comfortable. When I declined, the being switched voices again and talked in my deceased grandfather's voice. I felt more at ease then. I was given a life review while inside the void. During this review, I told the being to pause. I wanted to better examine the parts of my life. I was then able to view these events from overhead. The life review did not last long because I asked the being something that surprised it. Can I plan my next reincarnation? I asked. The being said usually people wait until their actual death to choose their reincarnation. I was persistent because I already knew where I wanted to go, Japan. I was then taken to Japan via an overhead view. The being and I looked at various cities until we reached Numero in Hokkaido. I told the being that I wanted to be reincarnated here. Then I was given a temporary glimpse into my next life. All I remember about this part was that I was male and was wearing a dark-colored coat that was accented by a stylish autumn scarf while I stood in front of the train station. Then I returned to the void. I was suddenly dragged back into my body as the doctors restarted my heart. The revival failed, and I was pushed back into the void. I was back with the being. The being asked me multiple questions during the reincarnation conversation and will allow me to be autistic during my next life as well. Near the end of the conversation, I asked, wait, can I see my grandfather? And the being said, not yet. For the sake of my mother, I returned permanently to my body. After the surgery, I thought to myself, I saw an angel, but did not speak about it to my parents. I strongly believe that I will be reincarnated in Hokkaido during my next life. I believe our souls get some choice during the death process. This story was shared by Niels W. and happened in 1995.
Story 2. Instantly, I found myself standing on the side of the pool and looking at myself face down in the water. I was not moving. My cousin was standing behind me to watch the trick I told him I could do. I was completely at peace and had what I would describe as a better-than-bird's-eye view. I remember my attention being drawn towards the sky. When I looked up, I knew there were many different places I could go exploring. Even though I wanted to go, I looked back at my body and realized I needed help. I went through the yard looking for someone to help me. My feet were floating above the ground. I found it odd that there was nobody around because there usually were plenty of people around and it was broad daylight. I went into the ground floor of the main house and straight into the cook's room. I saw the cook asleep on his stomach in his bed in his very small bedroom. The back of his head was facing me. I was floating against the wall at the foot of his bed. I screamed for him in a panic, but the words that came out, it was energy. That same instant, he startled me because he jumped out of the bed and ran out of the room. He made it to the threshold of the door that led to the yard. He fell to a sitting position with his hands on his head. I stayed next to him until I saw him look up and towards where my body was in the pool. When I saw him get up and run towards the pool, I followed but got there before him. I went right back to where I originally showed up when I first left my body. When he got to the pool, I was facing him and on the opposite side of the pool. I saw him teetering on the edge of the pool trying to reach me without jumping in. I then went back into my body. I threw my hand up to him and he was able to grab my arm. He pulled me out of the pool. I didn't cry, cough, throw up, or speak for the rest of the day. I only moved from the spot that I was last put in if I was led by someone to a new spot. I was in a state of total peace like I've never known before that moment and never known since. I remember every detail of that moment to this day, even though I cannot remember anything else before or after that moment with that kind of detail. I remember the cook leading me back towards the main house and calling to several other people to join him so he could explain what just happened. He said he had just fallen asleep, when suddenly he felt like the room exploded, and he jumped out of bed so shaken that he barely made it to the threshold of the door before he had to sit down. As he was trying to figure out what had just happened, that's when he saw clothes hanging on the rebar that was still exposed near the swimming pool. He said he knew I was in the pool and went running to find me. He said, as tears ran down his cheeks, "She wasn't moving, I thought she was gone." I never talked about what I saw until I was in my late teens, and most people were dismissive of my story. I started researching other accounts to compare my experience when I was in my 20s, but never found an exact account like mine. This story was shared by Sandra M. and happened in 1975 or 1976. Story 3. All my vital organs were compromised. The correct diagnosis is Morsch-Voltman syndrome, otherwise known as stiff person syndrome. Visitors were told that I was probably going to die. I don't remember how bad my breathing was, but a friend who was also a nurse came to visit me. She later told me that I was gasping for breath about 4 times a minute. Having witnessed death quite a bit, she thought that every breath was my last. Meanwhile, I went somewhere else. I was in a thin and large transparent tube, like a very thin membrane that I could see through. I was running through the tube at light speed, watching the stars and the universe go by. The amazing part to me at the time was that I could not walk at all, since I used a wheelchair and was completely stiffened. This experience of actually running was so freeing, so amazing, and so wonderful. Looking forward, the tube seemed endless as it was twisting away into eternal space. But I didn't care because I was so free, and with every running step it took me eons away. Then I was suddenly in a beautiful place. There was a meadow to my left as it descended down a rolling hill with wildflowers. There was a lush green forest in the distance beyond the meadow. There were 2 people there with me. Behind these people was a stone wall covered with ivy. That wall separated me from everything else in front of me. I could not see over it or around it. One of the people was like a gardener with a rake. It seemed to me that he was absently raking the stones or the gravel in front of the wall. It reminded me of how Buddhist monks make calming designs in gravel. But I had the feeling that he was paying attention to what was happening with me and the other person. I later felt that this person, whose face I could never see, was probably my deceased father. My father and I had had a rocky relationship during my childhood and teenage years, and up until the time he had died. I felt that he wanted to be there to know that I was okay, and for me to know that he deeply loved me in spite of some of the things that had happened between us. He died when I was 21, and I never got to repair our relationship. I had always wanted to resolve my anger towards him and my deep fear of him. The other person is difficult to describe. He was made of love. Everything about him exuded love and defined what love really is. He took me into his arms and just held me there. He fed me that love, that calm and peaceful love. My life had been so painful for so long. I was trying so hard to just live for our young children. I was trying to maintain some sense of purpose rather than being a very sick and costly burden. That moment, when I was so gently held by this person, I felt healed of my deepest grieving and my greatest loneliness. I felt he had answered my most unasked questions, told me I was unquestionably and deeply valued and loved just as I was. It was all communicated to me without any words whatsoever. Then I woke up in the ICU. This story was shared by Lynn Z and happened in 1994.